You're uniting the Jews of the world, but you're also trying to unite much more locally and grassroots here in Israel, uh, which is arguably a much more difficult job. How, tell us a little bit about that
Yeah,
and how you got into that.
for sure. So, it's something that all of us in Israel have experienced in a way or another is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Whether it's rockets, terror attacks, war, conflict. I lost several friends in war in 2014 that were soldiers. I've lost friends that died to terror attacks. And I would say that everyone in Israel has experienced some sort of residue from this conflict. And the reality is that we ask ourselves, like, why are we even fighting in the first place? And that's something that I always ask myself. I wasn't taught that Palestinians were evil or were necessarily inherently bad. Yes, there are some that are bad, but that doesn't mean all are. And I would say when I was a student at Columbia, there was these groups that claimed to be pro-Palestinian, and the reason I say they claim to be pro-Palestinian is because there's never a pro-Palestinian event that they ever did. The only events that they would do on campuses are against
Anti-Israel.
Israel, and they would never talk about Palestinian suffering if it had to do with thousands dying in the Syrian civil war at that time, where I was a student, or suffering on the border of Gaza and Egypt, or those suffering under Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, or in refugee camps in Lebanon and Jordan. They would only talk about Palestinian suffering if it could be used against Israel and, of course, taken out of context. So I realized that a lot of these voices that were claiming to support the Palestinians, or even thinking that this is the way to support the Palestinians, didn't actually care. And my mindset at the time was like, the day that you guys have enough honor and respect to come to the table and to really speak, with full respect towards each other and to come with a solution together, then that's the day I'll be ready to speak to you. Until then, if you want to, claim, like, seek for my annihilation, then I'm not going to respect that. And after I went to South America, after I graduated university for my bachelor degree, I had an experience that made me see things in a different way, and it made me understand how holistic truth works. And I realized that for them, the reason why they think they are suffering, which they are, is they're told that it's because Israel exists. And so the only way to undo that suffering is by destroying Israel. So it's not in their DNA, in their mission statement to destroy Israel. Destroying Israel is a way to get to what they want. And what they want is a reality where they experience freedom and justice and equality from the river to the sea, which you can respect and would love to see a reality where we can all experience that freedom. And they're taught that the way to get to that is by the destruction of Israel. So it's not their goal to destroy Israel. It's a way to get to their goal for some that have been told that this is the way to do it. So if we were to create a reality where they're no longer suffering and they're living in a just reality, free, then there would be no more reason to destroy Israel. And when you look at the Jewish people, it's not in our mission statement or in our DNA that we need to destroy or attack Palestinians, but we face them because we experience them as an enemy with opposition, and there's checkpoints and there's other things. And so there's the actions we're taking towards one another is not fundamentally what we want. It's what we're doing in order to get to what we want. And if you really break down what we both want, they don't contradict. Living for us in a Jewish state is not something that for them they can experience that same Jewish state as a Palestinian state. Because if you look at what Palestinians really want, is they want local control. They care about who's the leader and the family that's running the kfal, the city, the village. That's what they care about. When Israelis, it's actually the opposite. You go to most Israelis living in, I don't know, Kfar Saba, Tel Aviv, Beersheba, Haifa, Tzfat. They don't know who the mayor of that city is. Very few Israelis actually care about who the local power is. We care more about national power.
Right.
So I think the way to create a reality is by fundamentally understanding the aspirations that both collectives have, which are different, and the suffering that both experience, which are also different, and then creating a reality that focuses on fulfilling those needs. And once you create that, that's creating justice. And when you have justice is when you have peace. You can't have peace without justice.
So, how do we get there though when there are so few of you and so many of Hamas and Islamic Jihad and who knows what?
Yeah, well, I
I mean, as
think
you said, even in the states, where you went to Columbia, you said, as you just pointed out, it's a very pervasive ideology.
yeah. Well, I look at it this way. You know, my mother's side of the family is Sephardic. My grandparents were born in Morocco and Algeria, And my dad's side of the family has an Ashkenazi experience. My grandparents were born in Poland and Belgium, and almost the entirety of my family was exterminated in the Holocaust. And so you look at the civilization that was responsible for that, Germany. If Germany can go from 1 year being under Nazi control and having the goal and to kill all the Jews and eventually killing 6 million, to 10 years after that, supporting the state of Israel, I think that between cousins living on the same lands, we can find resolutions. The only issue is we need to create the conditions to do that. There are many forces that are profiting from this conflict, whether economically, politically, and so on. And I think we need to also start humanizing one another. Most Palestinians don't necessarily have relations with Israelis, and most Israelis don't necessarily have relations with Palestinians. And we experience each other as the enemy of our story. And I think what we need to start doing is understanding each other's stories, experiences, history, aspirations, and when we start building those relations, things start to change. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing is uniting Israelis and Palestinians and starting conversations that shift the mindset of many living on both sides that could have been conditioned to seeing the world as I'm good, they're bad, they will always be my enemy and I'm the good guy, and realizing actually the majority of both of us are the good guy, and it's those that are profiting from our conflict that are manipulating us to think that we need to fight each other to survive, and that's what's causing the conflict. And I think a lot of media and a lot of people who talk about Palestinian suffering, they forget the why. They talk about the what. Yes, Palestinians are suffering. That's what's happening. But why is it happening? If you don't focus about the why, then you'll never be able to change the why. And I think in order to understand the why, we have to realize that we've been conditioned since 1948 and even before that to see each other as the source of our suffering and what prevents us from achieving our aspirations. And as long as we see the reality as a zero-sum game, neither of us will be able to continue, because there is no reality where Israelis or Palestinians disappear. So I think those that have to come together are those that are the proudest and strongest in their own identity. The proudest and strongest Jews have to be the ones on the table with the proudest and strongest Palestinians. Not the Palestinians that will say whatever you want to hear on the side of the Israelis, and not the Jews and Israelis will say whatever you want to hear on the side of the Palestinians. But those who truly represent their cause, to be the ones at the table together in order to find ways to move forward. And I think the solution is a process. It's never going to come from a piece of paper, here's the solution, now go and apply it. It's a process, just like you're creating your painting, right? It's a process.
Yeah.
Eventually, you might switch, you might make a mistake, you might use that, you might evolve. And
oh yeah, you look like Ronald McDonald over here.
you might change it into many things along the way. And we should look at the conflict just like you're making your painting. That you can come up with the original idea, but you might not know what you get until you actually go and start doing that. And the artists are the Israelis and Palestinians. And if the artists don't even engage with each other, they'll never even have a conversation of what painting they want to create in the first place.